Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for what it turns out is the 84th Worldwide Radio Operator Foundation webinar. My name is Mark Beckwith, my call sign N50T. I'm your host, but really I'm just pressing the buttons and clicking the controls. This evening's webinar is presented by a good friend, Ed Munns, W0YK, the director of the CQ Worldwide RTTY DX Contest. He's going to tell us all the latest news about it and some history. I like the subtitle of his talk, Legacy Digital Contesting. Boy, it is a whole new world here. So a little bit about the instructions here. We will hold questions for the end. There is in your control panel for GoToWebinar one of the many gray tabs says questions. And if you expand that by clicking the little square box with the diagonal pen in it, you'll have the ability to type questions. We will see them and we will process them accordingly, but we will wait till the end of Ed's talk to do that. Now, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ed, who is coming to you direct from the island of Aruba in the Caribbean, CQ Zone 9. Let's see, I got to press this button, make Ed the guy, and turn it over to him. Go ahead, Ed.
Okay, show my screen. I think I did the right thing.
I see your screen.
So good evening, everybody, or whatever part of the day it is where you are. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you, Mark, for setting this up and moderating it, and because I probably wouldn't be able to run it all by myself here. So as Mark noted, the subtitle of this is Legacy Digital Contesting, because as we all know, seems like the latest craze in ham radio contesting and ham radio in general. In fact, here at the bottom of the sunspot cycle is all of this FT operating and contesting, but we're going to talk in this webinar about the upcoming contest, which is going to be the 33rd CQ Worldwide RTTY DX Contest. It's the 32nd year, but the 33rd contest, of course, and we'll go through a number of things about it. And as you think of questions, go ahead and write them in the question box, and that'll get them logged in, and then we can have a discussion at the end. And why am I not able to? So this contest coming up actually is the highest participation based on the number of logs that we receive of any RTTY contest. So it's the big granddaddy of them all. And the CQWDX RTTY is a close second to this one. And we used to say that, I used to tease the CW and sideband people that the RTTY contest opened the CQ Worldwide season, because of course it's the last full weekend in September, and the other two follow on the last full weekends of October and November. But with this year, with the inaugural running of the Worldwide Digi DX Contest, although it's not sponsored by CQ, it actually sort of opens up the season in August. And fortunately, it's a weak signal mode, so even though August isn't the best month to have a contest, it worked out really good actually a couple weeks ago. So what you can do if you're interested in all the modes is use the RTTY contest to check out your station and antennas and the operators and make sure everything's working really good. I also like to point out that for people that are skeptical or not quite sure about the RTTY mode and how it relates to the other two modes, one of the great things about RTTY is that since the machine is doing the decoding and encoding, you don't have to copy CW or listen to sideband. Your brain is more freed up. You have more brain cells to apply to developing other contesting skills, and so it's a real great training ground for things. As an example, SO2R, if you're getting into that. So these are the things that we'll talk about this evening, and anything that comes up in the questions is fair game as well. I think it's interesting to go through through the over 30 years of this contest and position it with the CW and sideband events, and then talk about some of the resources that are available, some of the questions that people may have in logging and log check reports, scores, database, and the various tools that are available to us. So the inaugural event was back in 1987. It was actually co-sponsored by two journals, the CQ magazine and the RTTY journal. There was a specific RTTY journal that went on for several decades and is no longer in existence, but it was kind of the go-to publication for RTTY operators in general, not just contesters, but operators altogether. So on the left side of the screen is the first announcement of the first CQ Worldwide DX Contest. It was held, interestingly enough, on the last weekend in September of 1987, and we've done the same thing ever since. The first one actually included 160 meters as well as other digital modes beyond Baudot or RTTY as we know it. And the first contest only had two categories and only had high power in those categories, single op and multi-single. And the single op was on the first 30 hours. By the way, sometimes we talk about in a rule like this, we say that single ops can only operate 30 hours. And that's really doing a disservice to the contest, because single ops can operate in this case, or like WPX that currently has a 30-hour limit for single ops in the RTTY section, is only a scoring limit. In other words, only the first 30 hours of your log are scored for the contest, but operate as much of the contest as you want, and in fact, you're encouraged to do so. And if you're a single band entry, you can operate other bands. We just score your log based on single bands. So feel free to operate as much as you want. The first contest had 280 entries, but if we look at that starting point and where we are today, we for the last decade have gotten over 3,000 entries, and you can see the anomaly in 2002, basically up until the end of that decade. Down at the bottom, I'm showing the three directors of this contest. Ray Gould, K1 Radio Yankee, kicked it off and led it for a number of years, and then Glenn Vincent, W6OTC, took over in 2001, and I've been the director since 2008. And I like to point out that since I took over, the growth stopped. It's still above 3,000, but that really steep growth there we had in the early years has tapered off here in recent years. So I don't know if that's completely due to the solar cycle or what. I might also point out, if we were looking at this same graph for CW, the CQ Worldwide CW, it's actually continued very steep growth and is up over 8,000 participants now in recent years. So contesting is still very popular pastime. If we look at the evolution of the rules, you know, I said 160 was in the initial rule set. Well, the very next year it was dropped. I think based on the experience of running the first contest, they decided that for RTTY, it really wasn't necessary to have the 160 band. So that was actually dropped, and it's still not part of the contest even today. In 1990, the assisted class was added and the multi-multi class was added. So we now had single op, unassisted and assisted, multi-single and multi-multi, but still only high power. So in 1993, low power was added. Next year, the 30-hour limit for scoring limit on single ops was dropped, so they now could operate the full 48 hours, just like in CW and sideband. So you can kind of get the trend here. What's happening over time is that the rules are converging closer to the CW and sideband modes of the contest, just based on the experience that we've had in all three modes and what seems to make sense. So in 2001, the RTTY journal ceased to publish, and so the contest was taken over completely by CQ, and was honed back to only the RTTY modes. So the other modes, packet and Amtor and so forth, were taken out of the contest. And fundamentally, kind of like the RTTY Roundup, if you're familiar with that, which is basically all digital modes, the dominant mode is RTTY. There's very little, if any, operation on the other modes. And so CQ decided to take that out. And they added the multi-2 category in. So now the contest had all of the categories that it still has today that the other two modes have. And then the year after I took it over in 2009, I added the low power category to multi-single, and I adjusted the band change rule. The sideband versions and RTTY up to this time had a 10-minute rule for band change restrictions on multi-single, but band change number of either 8 or 10 for multi-2. And so I made that the same for both multi-single and multi-2, and made it band changes because I felt it gave more flexibility and still accomplished the goal of restricting band changes to monitor the rules. And then in 2011, we added low power to the assisted category, and the next year we added QRP to both single op and single op assisted. So now the contest is, with very few exceptions, similar in rules to CW and sideband. Speaking of which, here are the 4 differences between RTTY and the other 2 modes. As we noted, no 160. And then the RTTY contest has a third multiplier. There's 2 multipliers, the CQ or WAE and DXCC countries, and CQ zones are multipliers. But for RTTY, we have a third multiplier, which are US states, continental states, and VE areas. And so that puts North America a little bit more, well, I should say the population density of in Canada and the US more on a par with the geographic density in Europe in terms of multipliers. And then the third difference is in QSO points. There's 2 minor differences. One is that the same continent but different country counts for 2 points on any continent in the world. And the other 2 modes, that's only the case for North America, and all other continents are just 1 point country, I mean, it's a different country in the same continent. And then secondly, in the RTTY contest, we do give a point for each same country QSO, whereas in the other 2 modes, there's 0 points. And you may, if you operate those modes, you're familiar with the kind of somewhat contentious tactic of trying to work somebody, say here in the US, in another zone, when neither one of you are going to get, but you do it because you need to get that zone on that particular band. And so we accommodate each other, but it's a little awkward at times. And then fourth, I talked about the band change rule being consistent between MS and M2 is 8 band changes per clock hour. So the websites have really been developed in the last 10 years to a real source of sources for us in contesting. I'd like to go through that. And in fact, to do that, I'm going to actually go off to the website. This is the home page of the CQ Worldwide RTTY DX Contest. And you can see up here at the top, all of the CQ contests in all the modes are listed, as well as the WW Digi contest that was just added this year. And so from the home page, this top menu allows you to get to a number of resources. If you go to the rules page, of course, the rules are there as expected, but on the right-hand side, there's a menu for all the translations. These are all PDFs, and so it starts off with English. If you want to print out a copy to have with you to look at, you can do that. then a number of other languages are there. And I really appreciate the volunteers that do these translations for us each year. They've been really great and good at doing this for us on a volunteer basis. Of course, there's a plaques page, and we list the plaques here that we have sponsors for, and some of the main plaques, like there are a couple here that don't have sponsors right now. But this is not, these are not, program is not restricted to just what we have listed here. We can have plaques made for any conceivable category you want. If you want to have a plaque for a single op assisted QRP in the Whiskey 7 area of North America, that can be done. And so we'll talk a little bit more about plaques later, but this is just shows the sponsors of the various plaques. On the results tab, there are a number of things there. Of course, the results for the contest, which will be predominantly the PDFs of the pages out of CQ magazine, of the score listings and the article and so forth. Then there are two score databases. The main score database is, has a number of parameters that you can put in. Select a particular category. You can select a continent or a country. In some countries, like the US, you can select the area within the country. If you leave those open, then basically you're looking at the whole world. This tab up here is, we can look at all contests back to the beginning. We've entered all the data back to 1987. So you have all of that. So you can look at all years together or the contest. So there's no filters being done. We're looking at all contests. So these are the all-time high scores, regardless of category or region or anything. And so you can see the top of the chart is predominantly occupied by multi-op stations, as you might expect. And as you go further down the chart, we start to get some single op operators in there. But again, you can go through and sort this by any number of years. So that's really great. And there's some options here to show clubs or breakdowns of the band breakdowns, show all the operators and that sort of thing. And you can decide your sort order is. So it's a fairly capable database, and really appreciate the work that Randy K5SSB has done to set this up, and a number of people that typed in all the early data that wasn't available in electronic form. There's a similar database, same structure, for the overlays, and there are two overlays in this contest like there are in the other two modes, which are the classic mode, which is a single radio 24-hour operation, and then the tri-bander and wires category, so you can look at the all-time results in that. There's a page for club results, and then raw scores is the claim scores after people have turned in their logs. We'll put up a page, so it's kind of like 3830, except that the scores are computed from our log checker before log checking reductions are made. In other words, any errors in your log are ignored. So it's kind of like the claim score that you get from your logger, except that it's calculated from the log check software. So any discrepancy that you might have in your logger, for example, of the version of the country file, it might score things a little different. And so we go obviously by the log checking is the standard. And so this gives you kind of the official 3830 standing of scores that are submitted. And then entry stats is the graph that I showed earlier that shows since the beginning of the contest what the number of logs received were. On the records, we can go by region and look at, for instance, the world, and look at the various records and the different categories. And also available is QSO rates. This is a nice feature that was added in the last couple of years, where you can again have some sort filters up here, but it shows what the high 1 hour rate. So these are the highest 1 hour rates that have been achieved in RTTY, and the same thing exists in the CW and sideband website. So it's kind of fun to look at that. And if you look at an entry here, you can go off and click on the log and actually look at the original log for that hour and see what the time was and what stations were being worked and so forth. So it's kind of a fun thing to go through. This logs tab is probably one tabs that you'll use on the website, because this is where you're going to submit your log. There's a page here that gives a lot of information about submitting your log. I'll talk about some of it here in a few minutes, but you can read that offline and look at things there. One thing that I would point out for you is that the mixed W, that's a RTTY logging and encoder software that's actually very, very popular. It needs to be configured properly before you log the first QSO. If not, it's very difficult to create a proper Cabrillo log at the end. So we have a little write-up that's done by Rich of VE3KI that explains how to set it up beforehand and how to get the Cabrillo log out. So if you're using MixW or know anybody that is, make sure that they read these notes before they start the contest. There's a page on the Cabrillo log file. If you're not already familiar with the Cabrillo format, it's just the arrangement of ASCII characters. So you can look at a Cabrillo log file with any text editor. There's nothing magic about it. Any text editor like Notepad or WordPad on Windows or MS Word or the equivalent text editors on the Mac can look at a log file. We'll have a page on logs received. Turned in your log, you can check here and make sure that your call is listed, and that gives you confirmation. You'll also get an email, so there's two different ways that you'll get confirmation that your log came in. Location names give you the official mnemonics or two-letter abbreviation that you need to have in the location field in the Cabrillo header. The club name page gives you the exact spelling of the club name for your club. So sometimes there's variations in how clubs are named, either by the abbreviation or by the full name and so forth. And so the official name is here, and you want to make sure that you use what we have listed on this page in your log for your club. And then this last one, whoops, public logs. We have all the logs online from all the participants of prior contests. So you can go on prior logs of anybody and get an idea of propagation and when the rates were high and low and when people took breaks and that sort of thing. And so it's a good resource to get prepared for the contest. Let's see. Unfortunately, my screen is covered up here. So okay, contact us. All right. So let's go to the log page and let's actually upload a log so that we can talk, because this is a pretty important part of using the website. This is the upload page, and actually there's nothing in this drop-down menu because there's only one, the RTTY contest here. All you have to do is answer 3 questions and then plug in your log. So the 3 questions are power and whether you're assisted or not, and how many operators there were at the station. So I took my log from last year, from 2018, and I changed the dates to the contest dates for this coming weekend. At least I think I did it correctly. So we'll see here in a minute how well I did, because I haven't actually tested this. And let's say that I was high power and I was assisted, and there was just one of me. And I'm answering these to show you what the errors look like, so we can create some errors. So now to put my log in, I have 2 choices. I can open up my log in a text editor and then just select all the text, do a right click and select all, and then do a copy, and come down here and do a right click and do a paste and just put it in this window. So it's real simple. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to choose the file here on my computer. Find it, so I hit choose file and it brings up the browser. I go to, actually I'm in document, I'm actually pretty close to where I need to go. So if I go to documents, in my case, I did the log last year with write log. So I've got my contests here. I go down to 2019, even though it's last year's log, I doctored it up for this year. So see, this doesn't have to work the contest. I've already got my log a week before the contest. So here's my log. I just click on that, and you can see it's listed over here. I say down here, I'm ready to hit process. So what's going to happen now is this application, this web page, read my log, and what it's looking for are format errors. It's looking for any problems in the log. It's not checking the log, obviously, against other logs. So this is not that. It's just simply looking at the format so that when we do log checking, it's easier to get the log checker to work. So you can see we got some error messages here. It says the category assisted entry is wrong. That's because in my file, in my Cabrillo header, I was non-assisted, and so it has taken that out of the commit down here. If I wanted to change it, I could down here, so I don't have to go back to the log and make changes. Second thing here, it says the category. Oh, I put sideband. I doctored up my log and put sideband in, which of course is wrong. So I'm going to select ready to correct that. And then it says the power is wrong. I was actually low power here, and I remember before we got into this, low is the correct one there. And by the way, if you have anything wrong, your Cabrillo head set the power line. This template will put a default in. I think it puts the high power category in. We'll always put something in, correct it here. You can come down here and change this information, but all this information came out of the Cabrillo head of the log. In fact, if you want, we can go down here and let's just open up the log for those of you who haven't seen what a log looks like. Write log, contest, 19, worldwide ready. And so here is what the log looks like. And this area up here in the top, before you get to the QSO line, that's called the header. And this has all the information in it, like your location. In my case, I was outside of North America, so it's just everybody outside of the States or Canada's DX. The call sign and so forth, you can read down through this. So these are all the parameters that were on this other page that you can change if you want to. And this is what the QSO lines look like. And you can see this contest, there's two parts to the exchange, the zone and the QTH field, which for stateside stations like 85LU is in Texas. And if you're a DX station, DX gets filled in here. Now in the contest, you don't send DX in the exchange, but your logger will put DX in here because we need a placeholder for this place in this field in the QSO line of the Cabrillo log. So that's what Cabrillo log looks like. As I said, you can open it up with any text editor if you want to look at it. Okay, so I think we've corrected all this. So we come down here and we hit process again. Here's the place where you can put in your club if it's not already in your Cabrillo log. And we'll see what we get. So it's still complaining that oh, I see. So what it's saying is that my log does not match the questions I answered. So it's going to force me to either go back and change my answers to the questions, which I could do if the log is correct. Well, let's say I answered the questions correct and my log was wrong. So I can just come in here and type hi, And what was the other? Oh, assisted. And so I can just come in here and make this assisted. And now come down here and hit process again. And voila, the page changed. So now I'm on a different page and it says log is ready to submit. What that means is all the errors were fixed. And so we're ready to submit the log. My email address is important here because it will mail a copy of the log to you. You don't want that. You can uncheck that box. But it's going, in any case, it's going to send you an email confirmation telling you that we have your log and that it's been submitted. So you just hit that, and you get a confirmation number, the time that it was submitted, and this is just a summary of what it found. And I actually had about 3,500 contacts, so I must have done something wrong when I edited the log. It only takes 176. Okay, so that's the nitty-gritty of how to submit your log. And one of the advantages over the old system where you sent it into an email address is that while you're on that initial page, as you saw, as you make corrections, it keeps giving you feedback about whether you're getting things right. So you don't have to email it in and get a cryptic email message back about the errors and try to figure out what to do. You have a full page there that can allow you to change things pretty easily. So it's a pretty slick way to do it. Okay, so now if I want to go back to the presentation, I can do that, I guess. All right, so when I say submit a good log, what I mean is do what we just did. You know, correct the format errors in your log. If you took notes during the contest, you know, say you were badly and you made a typo and you didn't have time to correct it, so you made a note on a piece of paper, you can go back and make those changes. Clearly, you cannot go back and put information into your log that you gleaned outside of the contest, either outside of the contest period or outside of the operation of the contest of exchanging information with other stations. So in other words, you can't go to a database to look up somebody's zone or their state. You had to get that information during the contest. If you don't get the information, it's no big deal. You won't get credit for the QSO, but you need to leave the QSO in your log. You want to leave everything in your log. Otherwise, you wind up penalizing other participants in the log for not in log. I think we covered most of these things in one way or another. This first point here, I say 95% of the log checking effort that we do in the back office here is simply editing logs. In other words, it's not running the log checker. Nowadays, the computers, PCs that we use at home are powerful enough to completely log check the entire contest in literally 2 or 3 minutes from the time you press go. The entire contest is log checked. All of the output files, the scores listing, the things that we, in the box scores and everything that go into the magazine, all of that is spewed out in 2 or 3 minutes of running the logs through the log checking program. So what takes the time, it takes several weeks, sometimes months, is going through logs that have problems. They may make it through the format screening that we just showed, but there could be other problems. Maybe the submitter put the wrong call. For example, what can happen sometimes is you use somebody else's computer that they've used for ham radio contesting. It has their call in it, and when N1MM makes the log, it puts their call instead of your call in for the initial call. And of course, that's going to create all sorts of havoc when we run the log checker. And as we diagnose what the problem is, we'll find out problems like that. Or somebody has a problem where hours of the log doesn't get logged. And so it's basically an incomplete log, and we need to note that so that we don't unfairly hurt other participants in the contest because the data is not there. So it's really important to submit as clean a log as you can. I didn't show this on the database when we were looking on the website, but 2015, if you were in the U.S. and take me for example, W0YK. I actually live in California right now. The up until 2015, the results score database would list W0YK/6, even though I didn't sign my call that way in the contest. And that was just something we had to do administratively to be able to keep the scores separated by the various locations within the states. And we've got a different way of doing that now. We don't need to doctor up the calls. And so since 2015, the call that you actually used in the contest is what's shown on the database. So if you look at those earlier years and see a stroke number by your call, that's just us doing it for administrative purposes, and you don't need to alert us that we made a mistake. It was intentional. So one point that I really like to stress here is put every single contact in your log that you submit, that you make during the contest, whether or not it's you think a valid QSO, maybe you made a mistake or something, and you want to leave it out. Do not leave it out, because it can wind up penalizing somebody else if they turn in a log and we don't have the evidence of the QSO in your log. If you're a single band entry, feel free to operate on any of the other bands, but leave all of those QSOs in your log. When we score it just based on the band you were on. If you were 20-meter single band, then we only score the 20-meter QSOs. So leave everything in the log, including dupes, any of your mistakes, and so forth, so that we can do a better job at log checking. If you don't do that, it just makes a lot more work for the log checkers. Real upload, I think we covered all this by actually showing how it works. I didn't make the last point here that you can resubmit times as you wish. Just make sure that the last time you submit is before the deadline. The deadline on all the CQ contests now is only 5 days out. So a week from this Friday, 5 days after this weekend deadline. What the log deadline means is that you're not eligible for plaques or certificates if you submit your log after the deadline. But if you don't make the deadline, please submit your log anyway. Don't think that it's too late in that regard, because as long as we're still in the log check cycle, we can take logs right up to the last minute. Like I said, it only takes 2 to 3 minutes to run the log checker. So literally at the time we're ready to the magazine, we can put another log in the log checker. On the club competition, I showed that there was the club names webpage on the website, and so you want to go there and make sure that you put your club in exactly the way it's shown on that list. If your club is not on the list, put it list anyway, and if we get 4 or more entries from that club, we'll add it to the official list. If the club names that the 4 of you or more of you put down are different, then we'll decide on what the official name is going to be, and then from there on out in future contests you'll want to use that name for all your logs. And this list runs across all 3 modes: CW, sideband, and RTTY. Well, in fact now the WW Digi contest, we're running the same list. Let's talk a little bit about the log check report. It's surprising to me how few people check report, but what this is an analysis of your log based on the log checking, cross-checking we did with the other logs. It gives you a great look at how you did, where you're copying exchanges, did your particular problem not in log, that is, you had a number of QSOs in your log that weren't in somebody else's log, and so it gives you some feedback on how to improve your operating. And that's one of the fundamental goals of the contest, is to test our skills as operators. And so if you don't learn from that, and we don't look at how you kind of bent of it. So some of the sections at the very top of the log check summary, and you'll notice that throughout the log check report, there are 2 lines. So like on the QSOs up here, there's claim QSOs, and those are the same as what I called raw QSOs earlier. This is the number of QSOs computed by the found by the log checker before we take the reductions. Keep losing my cursor here. The next one where it says final, that's, you can see here, this is an example of one of my logs. I lost, what was it, 2274, looks like QSO. Okay, Mark, I don't know if you can help me with this. I keep losing my cursor, my pointer here. Oh, I know what I can do. Come down here, do laser pointer. Look at this, isn't this slick? Okay, so so there are these 2 lines: the claimed without errors removed in the final. So you can see that on QSO points, because you get different points for distance in this contest, whether it's your continent or another continent. The claimed and final countries, zones, and states, these are the 3 multipliers, and then the total mults, and then the claimed score. You'll notice in this case there was a score reduction of 2.5%. Excuse me, but if you come down here and look at the actual errors, duplicates don't count against you, they're just removed from the log. So I had 0.9% of my QSOs I copied the call incorrectly, case where I either the wrong thing or tried to type it in and fumble fingered it. And then I had 0.6% of my QSOs were not in log. This last one, uniques, are not, that's not counted against you. They're not removed. It's just telling you how many of your QSOs were unique calls were in other logs. And by the way, 99% of those uniques are usually busted calls. But if we can't prove it from the data that we have, we can give you a free ride on that. So anyway, going back here, so out of this list, the only 2 things is this 0.9 and 0.6, which is 1.5%. So how do I get a 2.5% reduction? Well, the not in log errors are penalized. Not only are the QSOs removed, but 2 times the point value of that QSO in addition. So that's to highly encourage you to put questionable QSOs in your log. If you don't think that you had a clean QSO, try to resolve it while you still have the QSO partner on the air, and make sure that you get any corrections made, but don't put it in the log if it's questionable and they may not put it in their log, then you'll get it. And of course that can happen from a number of things. I've inflicted this on QSO partners where we've had a perfectly good QSO and I hit the wrong key inadvertently and deleted the QSO and went on and didn't realize it, and the other person wound up getting a nil, and that's just one of the facts of life. But remember, these uniques down here, excuse me, this 1.4% uniques are nearly all of those are free rides, and so that kind of counts for errors that you make up here. So I could look at this log check report and say I had 1.5% errors that that I made, some of which may have been inflicted on me by others by actions that they took, but I got a free ride for 1.4%. So I basically broke even on this log check report. Now, not all of them are going to be like this, but that's just an example of how you can what those numbers mean. So then there's a section that shows the detail, the breakdown by band, all the same information of claimed and final score for all the mults and QSOs points. And then there's a section that actually lists every QSO that was not in log. So these are the QSOs that in this particular contest that I logged, but we didn't find it in the other logs. So you can go back and try to see what. This is the list of QSOs where I had the incorrect call. And so you can see here in my log, I had Sugar Papa 3 Golf X-Ray Mike, but the correct call was Sugar Papa 3 Golf X-Ray Hotel. And we know that from any number of reasons. The most prevalent is that we actually have the log, and we have the QSO line that matches this, and so we know that that I busted the call on that. And then busted exchanges show up here, and so you can see in this case I had Kansas down, but the correct state was Georgia. And here's band change violations. This was a multi-2 log, and there were 2 QSOs that we had outside the 8 band change per hour limit, and so they're listed here, and you get. And then these are unique calls. Remember that I said you get a free ride on that were not removed, and they just weren't found in other logs. Now, sometimes these can be, you know, a friend or a cheerleader that gets on and works you, and that's we really kind of frown on that, and would like if cheerleaders get on to work more than just their buddy, but work other stations as well while they're on the air. But what can happen here? But most of these are busted calls. See your loss multipliers up here. So these are QSOs that were taken out for one of the previous reasons, not in log or a busted exchange. And when that happens, then you lose the multipliers. You can see 5 of the 6 lost multipliers were due to not in log, and 1 was where I had an incorrect call sign. And then down only showing part of the 80 meter band, but for several pages you'll see all your multipliers listed. So countries or entities, zones, and then below this it's kind of truncated are the states and provinces, and you'll see that for each band, so you can see all of that detail. So a lot of good detail. And then lastly, there's a section that shows all the the stations, the logs that copied yearly. So these are different variations of my call, Papa 49 X-ray, that were wrong in other logs. So the scores database we looked at, and it's a great resource to either view your history, to look at past results, to look at a very specific reason. You can drill down into the Whiskey 5 area of the U.S. and see what different entry classes, what the records are, what the scores are, and see where you might be able to set a new record or beat your friend across the town in that area. We have a really nice certificate program that's all online now. We don't mail out paper certificates anymore. We distribute electronically and print locally, as Hewlett-Packard used to say in the printing business. But they're a beautiful certificate. If you put a nice piece of paper in your printer, you'll get a certificate that's every bit as nice as anything that we could mail you. And you can get it out of the printer without wrinkling it. It'll probably come through in better shape than it does through the mail system. And Randy's added some really nice features here. You can see that it shows in this case, yeah, this is his certificate. It shows #1 in the U.S. First call area. So that's kind of the highest level that he achieved was in the first call area. But over on the side shows that he was #2 in the U.S., #3 in North America, and #9 in the world in the single op high power all band category. So it really makes a nice certificate to kind of summarize how you did in the contest. And so no matter what level you're at, you'll get this kind of detail on the certificate. And that's by the way, you get to the certificate from the scores database. So you just go in there for any year that you operated the contest, and on the far right hand side is a little icon, a certificate icon. You click on that and download a PDF file that you can take to Kinko's and print, or print on your local printer or whatever. And then for plaques, this is the plaques that we use. The CQ Worldwide RTTY plaques have this red black background, marble background. The plaques have a green background, so that's how they're distinguished. All the plaques are $65. And that includes shipping to international locations anywhere in the world. So that completely covers the sponsorship of the plaque, or if you purchase a plaque. So if you want to sponsor a plaque, it's $65. Or if a plaque is not sponsored and you'd like to purchase it, or in the case of multi-ops, if the owner wants to get plaques for all the operators, they can order extra plaques and we can have those made up. And again, I reiterate that you can have a plaque made for any category, whether we listed it on the plaques webpage up here or not. You can pick any category, any obscure category, in fact, and you can make a plaque for it. And the plaque manager for the CQ RTTY plaque program is Rich Cady, N1IXF. And contact him to find out more about the plaque program. When the contest is over, or actually during the contest, I would really appreciate it if you take some pictures, especially pictures that include people, some human interest photographs of unusual situations. People like to show their antennas and all of that, and that's great. But it's really nice to have some people in the picture. There's some great sunset and sunrise shots that sometimes we put at the top of the article or on the cover, and so those are always great as well. Keep notes during the contest of what you experienced in terms of conditions and different things that come up, odd little happenings with QSOs and so forth, and just drop me an email with those so that we can make the write-up a little more interesting for the readers. We have a Facebook page that covers both the Worldwide and WPX RTTY contests here, so you can like that if you want to, and kind of get some periodics. Okay. And here is a list of resources. Obviously, we've gone over the website is a key resource, but there are a number of other websites. Don AA5AU has a couple of very nice websites with a wealth of material testing, and then of course all the loggers and a number of discussion groups, the RTTY discussion group, and some of these others, and there are even more that aren't listed here. Now this Thursday, North America time, or lapsing into Thursday or Friday morning in Europe, we have 2 practices scheduled. We schedule 2 practices so that we can try to get a little bit of European contingent as well as the North American people. So we have one at the 20-hour Zulu, which is evening time in Europe, and people that are retired or otherwise home here in North America can get on as well. And then we do another practice at the same time as this webinar that kind of favors the evening for North America. And just get on and you win the contest. The whole point of this is to practice your macros, your messages, everything set up in terms of your station, just like you would in the contest. You'll inevitably get somebody who'll drop by and doesn't know what's going on and try to help you understand that the contest hasn't started. So what some people do is they take an extra message memory and put a message in that says, yes, this is a practice for the upcoming contest this week. Well, you don't want to say a whole paragraph, but you can figure out words to say to let them know that you're aware that the contest is not really going on. It's just a practice. So with that, let's move on to the discussion period with questions. This is the station here at this where I'm sitting. Well, I'm sitting behind this this desk. The station is actually running FT8 right now. It has been for the last 48 hours. But this is where I'm right now. I'm getting prepared for the contest this weekend. And right after this contest, we're going to disassemble the station. We have on the outside, all the towers. We have to do this about every 10 years because they're literally rusted through. The far tower on the right is rung 45. And when I climbed it in May, I could put my little finger through the leg, one of the legs of the tower. There was a rusted hole through the tower that was that severe. So that's how caustic it can be in these salt environments. So we have just received our shipment of all brand new tower sections and antennas, and all that's going to get replaced over the next month. So Mark, can you get us set up to take questions?
Yes, I can, Ed. Thank you very much for a great and informative talk. There are two questions on the question bar, one of which is how many people are on the webinar right now, and the answer is 39. The second question, the next question comes from Pat, W3 Radio Germany Alpha, and he says, Ed, do you think with the addition of all the new FT8 ops who were traditionally not digital operators, will there again be a surge in submitted logs similar to the early 2000s?
Well, I don't know that'll, we're hoping that will eventually happen. I don't know that it will happen in significant numbers this year. We'll see, of course, but I'm not real optimistic that that'll happen. But in general, we're certainly optimistic that the FT8 excitement is bringing a lot of people into the contest. I like to quote the about the top 10 in the FT8 roundup that Don and I initialized the first weekend in December in 2018. We're going to run it again this year and also include FT4, of course. But the top 10 in that contest, 2 of the top 10 had never contested before. It was their very first contest. And the winner was one of those 2, and he had owned him for less than 2 years. So that's just kind of an exaggerated way of showing how this FT8 phenomenon is bringing a whole nother section into radio sports. So yes, hopefully this will impact maybe all modes. You know, I've heard a number of FT8 and FT4 enthusiasts coming on and saying that they're starting to take the Morse Code Academy that's off and learning Morse code. So that's just mind-boggling that this is going to be a really positive avenue potentially to get some more people into radio sport. Did that cover the question, Mark? I can't actually see the question, so I don't know if I answered that or something I just made up.
Okay, I'm clicking around here trying to get something back on the screen. That did answer the question, I believe. Pat says, great, thanks. And to anyone else listening, if you have a question, there are no more questions in the question panel. And if you see over on, I think it's probably the right side of your screens, there are a bunch of gray bars. One of them is questions. If you open that up, it gives you a place where you can ask questions. Or at this point, if anybody would like to click the button that puts up their hand, we can call on you and unmute your mic maybe, see how that works. Other than that, Ed, you did a great job of covering all these really kind of detailed logging and checking questions. You know, people are always wondering what, you know, if they get on the air, is it going to hurt anybody else? Or if they don't turn in their log, is it going to penalize somebody? That kind of stuff. Anyway, Ed, there's another question has come up from John. It says, can I find my past LCR reports online? No, not right now. We're working on, well, the way that LCRs work is, well, okay, let me give you the telegram first, and then I'll give you the longer answer. Just send me an email. The way LCRs are happening for the CQ Ready contest now, just send me an email for any contest, and I'll send you the. We have a system whereby we can send out email to everybody that participated, that submitted a log, with a link that goes to their LCR, and I just haven't run that yet. So I need to get that. I need to learn how to make it work and to do that. So that's kind of pushing, not really pushing the LCR, but at least pushing the link to you so that it can remind you to get it. But right now, in any time, you just email me directly and I'll send it to you right away. Okay, very good. Thanks, Ed. A couple of more questions have come in. Jim W7RY asks, can you please restate the importance of working dupes while contesting?
Okay. You know, it's surprising that we still have that that issue today, because at least 15 years, dupes are not a problem. And my personal philosophy on dupes is when somebody calls in and they're a dupe, is I just happily work them, because I can work them much faster than I can start a conversation and try to get them to understand that they're a dupe. I personally believe that people don't dupe you. That is, they don't call you knowing full well that they're a dupe and they're just trying to annoy you. You may be annoyed, but that's not their intention. They genuinely either have a problem in their log or something else that leads them to think that, or to not realize that that you're a dupe. And it's actually a good thing for both parties, because if the dupes are in the log and one of you on one of the two or more doesn't have the QSO in the log, you'll get credit for it. As long as we can find a QSO in both logs for those two stations, you'll get credit. So it behooves you. It's not just being a nice person or whatever. It actually is a benefit to you to leave all your dupes in the log, because it may just be that that person that duped you doesn't have you in their log, end up with a nil that member is penalized another 2x the QSO points. It's a pretty heavy penalty. So that's a good point that Jim is making. It's another really good reason to leave dupes in your log, because of the nil penalty.
Well, thanks, Ed. Excellent. Their questions are starting to come in fast and free now. Mike, ND, like Nancy Delta 9 Germany, ND9G, asks, are there plans to expand the error checking, good heavens, error checking of the log submittal in order to reduce the effort required for log checking and fixing?
I'm sorry, my brain didn't get that.
Yeah, it makes sense if you take it apart. There's a log submittal process where the website goes through some amount of error checking to make sure that your log is submittable. And I think
checking for format errors, not logging errors, but I mean, not content errors, but format errors. Yeah, okay. And then what's the second part?
In order to reduce the effort required for the actual log checking.
Well, that's what I think we're doing. So I'm not understanding the question. I'm sorry, I'm being really dense here tonight.
Hey,
because the whole point of that page is what I think the question is asking is you keep going through that loop of processing your log until we get all of the format errors out, because the more format errors you get out, the easier it's going to be for us in log checking. But I don't think that's maybe what we intend.
Okay, Mike has added here, you indicated that many of the problems were just due to simple errors. Your example was even submitting under the wrong call sign.
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, yeah, I gave that example because that's one that wouldn't be by the formatting. I mean, the formatting is looking strictly at whether the log meets the Cabrillo format. That is, that lines that all the fields have an entry and that the entry makes sense. So for example, in the RST field, if you had ABC instead of 599 or some set of 3 numbers, it's going to flag that. It's going to say, I don't recognize this as an RST. So it's going to find format errors like that, but it won't find an error like if you put the wrong, like say you have, you say in the Cabrillo header, it says call sign, I guess is what it says. And if you have the wrong call in there, if your logger puts the wrong call in, that's going to go right through the format checker. And we won't catch that until we get into log checking. that particular error will shine a big red light, because the entire log won't match up with anything, and that sets off light bulbs. But the sort of things that the log checker can't, the format check can't find are things like, what if you had your times off? What if you used local time instead of UTC time? Because remember, we're not, at this point, we're only looking at a single log. The software is only looking at the format of that single log. It's not looking at how it matches up other logs. So the errors that we find when we start matching it up with the other logs in the contest aren't going to show up at that point. But they will show up when we run the log checker, and then we have to go back and fix logs. So for example, if I find a log where the person used local time instead of Zulu, I have to go through and change all times. And I have tools to be able to do that, but it's a lot of manual work. And so that's why we want you to try to get your log right. But those are examples of error not be caught during the formatting. So if you think of log checking as kind of at a high level is a two-step process. One is to get the format of the log correct. That is to get all the information that fits the format. It's in the right place. Not checking the content. That is, other than that, if it's supposed to be a number, it's a number. If it's supposed to be letters, it's a letter. But it's not checking it's a valid number or a valid letter. That's only going to come out when you do the second step, which is log checking, after we have all the logs and we run them comparatively against one another and do cross-checking. So does that answer the question?
Mike, you can type us a response. He says somewhat is the answer. And Mike, I'm going to unmute your mic, and we'll see how that works, unless that doesn't work. So Mike, I've unmuted your mic, and I wonder if I can hear you. Go ahead. Oh, I don't have a mic hooked up. Got it. Okay. What I think is definitely an accurate answer for sure is to say that this process has gotten better and better year after year. I mean, if you remember what it was like turning in computerized logs a long time ago, it was kind of primitive by today's standards. And the submission process gets better all the time. And so does the log checking process get better all the time. So I think it's safe to say that yes, this is going to improve over time. I'm going to move on to the next question. They are really piling up here. A W5PR Chuck says, I think he wants to double check that multipliers count separately for each band and then totaled, correct?
That's right. So they count separately on each band and then just add it up for the total. I just wanted to say for Mike, ND9G, send me an email after this, and we'll try to resolve the rest of your question there.
Very good. Thanks, Ed. Brian, N9 Alpha Delta Germany, asks, what does Ed log when he works a station giving out an incorrect exchange, in other words, zone?
Well, let's see. Depends on what's incorrect. If the zone is the easiest thing that I can tell is incorrect, and so if I'm sure of the location, but he gives me the wrong zone, then I put the correct zone in the log. And fortunately, in the RTTY contest, you actually, especially here in North America, you actually have more information, because if he sends you Texas as the state, but says that he's in zone 7, you know that the zone's wrong, right? You know, it's not somebody in zone 7 that's sending you Texas as a QTH. So I would just say, use there. If you think the person is sending that same zone to everybody, and it's wrong, go ahead and put that in your log, and we'll catch that in the log checking. We'll catch that the wrong zone was being sent. Or what is more usually the case is somebody has the wrong zone and set up in their messages, and they work several hours of the contest, and they go, oh my gosh, I got the wrong zone, and they change. And by the way, that's kind of the wrong thing to do. If you start out doing something wrong, I would recommend that you finish the contest, because you've already got part of the contest wrong. We're going to have to deal with that. But you make it twice as hard if you change it in the middle of the contest, because now we got to deal with two different exchanges. So the first answer to the question, the answer to the initial question, is put in the zone if you're absolutely sure that the understand what their zone is. You can put that in. Unless you think that they're sending it to everybody, then you can go ahead and put that in your log, and we'll catch it in the log checking, and will not penalize you.
Very good. There are a few more questions. K2FF Glenn thanks you for answering questions. Pre and post contest, very helpful and prompt. And he asks, multi-1 stations get put into multi-2 or multi-multi if they make a single mistake on the multiplier station. Have you considered allowing more than one mistake, say 5 or less?
Actually, that's I'm not sure where that's coming from. That's not what we do. We only change categories if it's a flagrant violation. In other words, if it's pervasive throughout the contest. If it's 1 or 2 times, QSOs are just removed. It's like remember on the multi-2 log check report that I showed of Papa 49 X-ray, there were 2 band change violations. Well, that was we just lost credit for those QSOs. Now, if we had hundreds and we were just willy-nilly completely ignoring the band change, weren't even trying to do band changes correctly, then we might be reclassifying it. But so we don't reclassify based on 1 or 2 errors. We use judgment, and the bias is always in favor of the operator. This, think of this. We're not setting people up to fail. We're not trying to find fault. We want to find errors so we can give feedback on people's operating, but we're not trying to be. This is a party, right? This is supposed to be fun. It's our hobby. We're spending our weekend, and so the whole point of it is to enjoy ourselves. So the log checking is not doesn't have a mission to try to ding everybody as much as possible. Do a accurate job as much as we can of log checking so that you get accurate feedback on the quality of your operating, but we're not trying to be punitive. So long answer to the question, you don't get reclassified for a few errors. It's only chronic errors. And in that case, we try to understand, was there just a basic misunderstanding or, what was going on? But even in that case, if it was pervasive through the log, we'd probably go ahead and reclassify, but we'd help the person understand the mistake. And that, again, we're not trying to be punitive, but we need to be fair to the other competitor.
Thanks, Ed. Glenn says, nice, thanks. And he mentions that will help when we're trying to train a new contest operator. And I understand just what he means. So a couple of more questions, or actually one question. Anne says that she was unable to unmute herself, and I'm asking her in writing if she has a question. Joe asks if the presentation will be available online, and in fact it will. It might take a day or two for me to get around to figuring out how I download it and convert it and stuff like that, but I did it a couple of times last month, and it should get easier each time. So the short answer, yes, we'll have this presentation online available in the archives at the WWROF website. On the contest website, you can submit your log instead of having to email anymore. That is a great thing. But you mentioned, which made me scratch my head, that you press the button called process, and that runs it through and it helps you get it squared away. And what you said was then a lot of people think they're done when there's no more mistakes, but in fact they have to do something on the next page. Could you clarify that?
Yes. So just as a overview, to look at the forest instead of the trees, there's basically two buttons, if you will, or two operations you need to do on that web page. One is, as Mark said, keep processing the log until you and the web page get all of the format errors out of it. That's the first thing you need to do. And the second thing you need to do is simply click a button that says send log to server. I can't remember, some words like that. And it's at the top of the page once you have successfully finished the process. It won't go to that page until you've gotten all the errors out. So you're on the page that's telling you the errors, if there are any, and you keep hitting process. And once you hit process the last time with no errors, it takes you to the second page that at the top of it has a button that says submit log to server, or upload log, maybe it says upload log, and you need to do that. And a lot of people don't, they think they're done. Once they processed it and all the errors out, they think the website knows about their log, and they don't. They need to actually press that button that physically then uploads the log to our servers. Because up until that point, your log is just on that web page, just being processed by the software that's looking for format errors, and it's not automatically uploaded until you explicitly say upload the log. So just remember, you got to do two things: process and upload.
Very good. Well, thanks, Ed. Have a question from Dave, and my question screen is scrolling, so I'll get it back here. Dave wants to know, why don't you include N3FJP in the logging software?
Oh, there are a number of logs do come in from N3FJP loggers. The ones that I listed there just are the most popular, especially among the more serious or more frequent RTTY contesters. But there are a number of other loggers. There are probably 20 or 25 different loggers. I mean, there's loggers that most of us have never heard of from around the world that are used. So anything that can get a Cabrillo text file out is fine. It doesn't matter what logger you use. And I used to have a slide, it's not in this set, that showed a bar graph of the proportion of logs that came from each logger. And as I said, the N1MM, more than half the logs come from that. Everything else is a far second below that. But there are 25 or 30 different logging programs that send us logs.
Okay, well, yeah, that I know that N3FJP can turn in a Cabrillo format file, so that I hope answers that question. Another question here, this time from Mark. He thanks us for doing the webinar. You are most welcome. He has a general question. Can you talk about how to close out the reporting process? In other words, after submitting your log, what do you complete? 3830, club log, any other question mark? Also,
oh, okay, that's a good question.
Well, okay, I'll get the second half of his question after this. Well, no, let me ask it, and you can take it in pieces. He says also, if I want to be sure that my regional contest club gets credit, what actually gives them the credit? Over.
Okay, so on the first question, I'll just speak from kind of my experience and what I see other people doing. There are a number of different places like Club Log or 3830 or the so-called robot or the log upload page that we talked about here, where you can send your log. And so, especially for people that haven't been doing contesting for many decades, that can be confusing. And you kind of think, well, why can't I just submit it to one place and it just magically goes everywhere. Well, these are all different systems for different purposes. So 3830 is kind of a legacy reporting system. In the old days, before we had computers, it was done on the air. It was literally on 80 meters on sideband at 3830. Stations would get on and report their scores, and it was just kind of exciting. You spent 48 hours contesting by yourself, so you're competing against people around the world, but you're by yourself. In those days, you had no idea what was going on. There was no online scoreboards or anything, and so everyone got together after the contest. So when the internet came along and PCs and so forth, that was transferred to a 3830 scores web page. So that's kind of where that came from, to report. But as you saw from this presentation, the official log submission has to go to the contest sponsor, because 3830 is a mechanism that reports for all contests. So in this case, it comes to our CQ system. Your login needs to get submitted via the upload page like we talked about. But you can see that we now, in the last couple of years, have the facility to immediately run the log checker. As I said, it takes about 2 or 3 minutes to run it. And I can put a complete listing of the claim scores, or the raw scores, on the website, which is essentially the equivalent of 3830, except that it's been scrubbed by the official log checking software before errors are reduced. So that's the second one. And then, of course, there's Club Log and Logbook of the World, and I guess QRZ.com and EQSL and other mechanisms for different purposes. And so you really need to submit to all of those separately. Club Log has a facility that is somewhat integrated with Logbook of the World to make that easier. And so if you want to use all those facilities, you can get familiar with how they all work together. And so to kind of wrap that up, what a lot of people do is at the end of the contest, they submit their log to the upload page like we talked about here. They submit it to 3830. They upload it to Logbook of the World and Club Log, and then they're done. So they don't have to worry about that. Or if you wait a day to do it, fine, but it's probably good to sit down and do all of those things at once, so that you don't leave something out and forget about it as you get off with either other contests or other things in life. It's easy to forget to get your log submitted to Logbook of the World and so forth. I don't think I explicitly said, but as you probably know, in our contests now, the deadline on the CQ contest is 5 days. So Friday following the contest, which is I believe the 4th of October, is the deadline for this contest. Now, the deadline just means that if your log is received after the deadline, you won't be eligible for awards like plaques and certificates and so forth. But if our log checking is still open, which it for sure will be for several weeks after that, we still want to get your log. So even if something happens, you can't get it in on time, please send it to us, and if we can use it in the log checking, it'll be very helpful. So I've talked so much now, I forgot what the second part of the question was, Mark.
That's okay. The second part of the question was, if I want to be sure my regional contest club gets credit, what actually gives them the credit?
Oh, so we do that in log checking. So in your either your logger that creates the Cabrillo file, or on this log upload page, either place you can put in your club name. So for example, if your logger doesn't have the ability to enter your club name and then put it in the Cabrillo header of the Cabrillo file, when you upload it and you go to the process page, that first page that I talked about here, there's a form there, and the club name line will be empty, and you just type in your club name. But as I said, you want to make sure that you go to our club names page and type in the name of your club the way we have it written there, the way the spelling is, and dashes and punctuation and all that. If your club name is not on our club list, then just write it in anyway, and as part of the log checking, we'll pick up your log and others that have that club name, and we'll get it added to the club list, and we'll use that for our club competition within the contest.
Well, very good. Just would like to mention that you used the verb to scrub, and you also said earlier in your presentation, go back and do some cleanup. If you want to go back and do some cleanup, and I was hoping that you might take a minute to talk about what is and isn't a good idea in that regard.
Yeah, differentiate that. Yeah, that I probably just added to confusion rather than clearing things up by using those words. So the whole idea of contesting is to test our ability at operating, both for accuracy and for speed. And so all of that has to happen within the contest period. However, say you have a computer problem, or you fat finger something and you're running really fast. If you have a piece of paper and you make a note that I need to correct this call sign, or this exchange I got wrong, and you write down the time or the QSO and you write that down. So if you do that within the contest period, then that's the kind of cleaning or scrubbing you might do to your log later. That is, you've got information that you recorded, that you captured and recorded during the contest using the contest rules, but it's not physically in the computer log. And so you, after the contest, you might make those corrections, typos, basically, that sort of thing. What you don't clean or scrub is going into your log and putting in missing information that you did not collect during the contest. Say you missed an exchange or something, or you're not sure about a call sign. You don't get to go look at other databases or other information sources to put that information in, because that's not part of the contest. So that's not testing your ability to operate accurately and fast during the contest period. So it's pretty clear, anything that happens during the contest, you can clean up in your log, but any information that you glean outside of the contest period or from other databases is not kosher and is not part of the rules.
QSL. In general, emailing somebody after the contest, I think I heard you on 80 meters. I'm pretty sure you came back to me. Did we have a QSO? That kind of email is generally regarded as a bad idea, right?
Yeah, that's right. In fact, a good example, I'm this week while I'm preparing for the contest and doing other tasks around the property here, I've got FT8 running, and I get several emails a day saying, wow, it's my first contact with Aruba on FT8. I wasn't quite sure whether you confirmed the contact or not. Am I in the log and so forth? Well, this isn't a contest. And so if they actually are in the log, I answer their email and say, sure, yep, you're in the log. And, I'm going to upload the log to Logbook of the World at the end of the day, so you'll have it confirmed here in a few hours. But if that were a contest, I would simply say, look, I can't do this until, after the log deadline. Then we can talk about, our logs and what happened. But before the log deadline, I can't, we can't share information outside the contest period. So I don't get angry or punitive with people that approach me on email like Mark described there. I just use it as an opportunity to explain to them really what this whole question was about, was what is acceptable to clean up in your log and what is not acceptable to clean up in the log. And so it's just a way that we can share with each other how we want to play the game.
Very good. Well, I'm going to put out one. Hang on. There's another question from Carrie. It says here, some of contesters upload log to Logbook of the World. Is there a penalty for this? And I think the question probably means uploading it before the log deadline.
Yeah, no, we don't have a penalty for it. And one of the kind of unspoken, behaviors, or not really rules, but I guess I would just say behaviors amongst the community, is to wait to upload your log until after the deadline. I personally don't feel real strong about that one way or the other. I kind of take the high road of basically you know, trusting people. But if you're concerned about that, certainly one thing to do is to just wait until after the log deadline to upload to Logbook of the World. Because I suppose, you know, a person could, if you have uploaded your log, they can upload their log, and if they don't get a QSL, then they know that it's a nil. So, you know, they could go through their log and potentially eliminate nils, which would eliminate the nil penalty that you get. Because then, I don't know if you're aware of it, in the CQ Worldwide Contest, if you have a nil, which is a not in log, that is, you have a QSO in your log, but your proposed or purported QSO partner's log does not have the QSO, then you get what's called a nil. So you lose credit for the QSO because it's not in your partner's log, but you also lose 2 times the QSO points in addition. So it's essentially like losing 3 QSOs for the one. And we have that penalty to really discourage people from putting QSOs in their log that are marginal. That if it's a marginal QSO, then you should work on getting it not marginal during the contest, you know, while you're in communication with the person. Because again, we're trying to test, for all of us, trying to understand how fast we can operate and how accurately we can operate. And so guessing or putting questionable information in your log is not really in line with that. And so that's the reason why some people would say, well, I don't want to submit my log to Logbook of the World because I don't want somebody being able to go in and clean up their nils. It's kind of hard for them to do that unless they've made a note during the contest that that particular QSO is questionable. They're not sure about it, and it's maybe a juicy multiplier, and so they're going to hope that it shows up on Logbook of the World. So if that's the case, yeah, just wait until after the deadline and turn in your log to Logbook of the World.
Thanks, Ed. So now I'll put out that last call for typed questions in the question box. The Q&A period here is really becoming a discussion of logging, but that's really important. I had a guy ask me if other people get penalized if I don't turn in my log, and this was from a guy who I think was embarrassed that his log wasn't very good, and so he didn't think he wanted to turn it in, but now he was worried that if he didn't turn it in, would it penalize other people?
No, in fact, it's just the opposite. So the example that I was just talking about, the not in log, if Mark and I work each other in the contest, and Mark does not turn in a log, and then we don't have the log to cross-check against my log, and so I get credit for the QSO even if I messed it up because we don't have his log. Now, we have lots of databases and ways to know, you know, what the QSO should have been. For example, we know where Mark operates from, so we know what the multipliers would be and all. But if we don't have his log, we can't cross-check, so we can't penalize the other person. So it's just the opposite of the way the question was posed. So no, not turning in your log will not hurt anybody. Turning in your log potentially could hurt somebody if you don't have a QSO in the log, but you had it with the person. So if that's the case, let's say that you had computer failure and a bunch of QSOs got eliminated. You could send us a log, but send us a note, send me an email and tell me that your log is incomplete. Now, we find 99% of those. When we go through log checking, we'll see that, oh, in these 3.5 hours, this particular call sign is a nil in everybody's log. So we pretty much know that that log is what we call incomplete. That is, that there's a bunch of QSOs missing. But maybe it was only for a few minutes, or maybe it was only one QSO. If you tell us that, then we can set some flags in log checking so that the other person does not get penalized for mistakes that you made. So you just need to communicate with us. But for the most part, it's always good to send in your log. If it's a situation like you're posing here where it's incomplete or you've got mistakes in it that you're afraid will hurt other people, then just tell us and then we can deal with it.
Thanks, Ed, very much. There are no further questions, so I'm going to close it out here. But first, I'll